Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Linda, and I'm originally from Michigan, now living in the St. Louis metro area. I'm a college coach with School Match for You and have a daughter at University of Chicago.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a wellness coach at the Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, college counseling firm that I founded in 2010.
Good afternoon, friends. It is March Madness time, which is one of my favorite times of the year. Also, the sun is out, and April showers brings May flowers, they say, but at least here in Georgia, it's really, really nice right now. So I'm in a fantastic mood. Also getting ready to attend a SACAC conference next week, and then also getting ready for my big trip to Texas, which I'm really excited about. So a few announcements today, and then we're going to dive in with, I think, it's an exciting episode. I hope you'll think so as well. The first thing I want to say is that our Jen Chow registration is all set up. So if that name sounds familiar, Jen is the co-founder of Polygents, a leader in helping students do custom cutting-edge research projects at affordable prices. And I really, really, really have a lot of respect for Jen. I really enjoyed getting to know her when she was on the podcast. And Jen and Maureen reached out to me and said, do you know how many people from your podcast signed up after that interview? And I'm like, well, let's do a webinar so that our other families can just ask you the tough questions like I did, Jen. So it's all set. It's April 13th. Just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com under the events page. You'll see the sign-up sheet. That's 8 Eastern, 7 Central, 6 Mountain, 5 Pacific. And that's a Sunday. And that's April 13th. All right. Our next Counselor Connect meeting, if you're hearing this on Monday, is 6 days away. Very excited about this. Just came out of a planning meeting with Michelle literally before I recorded this. So you're going to hear from two excellent international admission officers, Mubarak and Emma. And they're not coming here to promote their own schools. They've done admissions at multiple schools, but they have a very good understanding of international admissions. And Kevin Newton highly recommended them to me. I had a great initial planning meeting. I'm very excited about that. That's going to be our Counselors Connect meeting. And I'm just putting a little FYI in your brain, so of course that's going to be the Sunday the 23rd. But the following month, that's the last Sunday in April, we're going to be talking about all the decisions that have come out this year and what surprised you. And I'm mentioning it now because as you start getting surprises from some of your students, I've already noted a couple of surprises that I've noted. A couple of schools I noticed a change in their selectivity. Notate them. And we're going to do something a little different. We're going to do the first 30 minutes in the entire group, all 100 of us. And then the last 30 minutes we'll break out and continue the discussion in our small affinity group. So you might want to start listing those down now. And you say, why are you saying that on here? The whole entire group got birthed just by me making announcements on here. That's how we got the 100 counselors. And we have a waiting list just from people listening to this podcast. Okay, my Texas trip is coming up. I mentioned that from the 9th of April to the 1st of May. And we have the most incredible listeners. Last week I said within 24 hours of announcing it, 2 people agreed to host an event. And I only wanted to do 2 events, so it filled up right away. But others have been reaching out to me. And one person reached out and said, I have a daughter that attends UT Austin. I'm sure she'd be happy to tour you around and talk to you when you're there. Another one said, my daughter's best friend attends Texas A&M. I'm sure she'd be happy to meet with you. Listen, I love meeting students, and that's primarily why I go to colleges, right? So I'm really looking for 3 things when I do a college visit. 1, to capture the feel of the place. There's a lot of things that go into capturing feel. Secondly, meet with admissions to learn about any new things related to admissions that I need to know. And the third is to meet with students. Those are really the three things that I look to do on a school visit, whether it's the first time to a school or it's the 15th time to a school. And so, yeah, I am more than willing to arbitrarily just go up and start talking to students. I block at least an hour out of my time to do that on every visit I take. But if you've got a student at one of the schools I'm visiting and you're willing to set it up for me to meet with them and maybe have more like a 15-minute meeting, as opposed to like a lot of times when I talk to students, it's more like, 2 to 5 minutes. And I talk to, 10 to 15 on each campus visit, occasionally 20. When I'm feeling really, really ambitious, I do 20, but I don't leave a campus without going to 10 to 15. So I'm just going to tell you where I'm visiting again. If you have a student at any of these schools and you ask them, hey, would you be willing to meet me on my visit? I would love that. So I'm just going to fly through these really quickly in order. SMU in Dallas, UT Dallas. That's also Dallas, Baylor and Waco, UT Austin, obviously Austin, Southwestern and Georgetown, Trinity of San Antonio, UT San Antonio, Texas A&M College Station, TCU, Texas Christian in Fort Worth, UT Arlington, that's obviously Arlington. I'm back to the Dallas area again, North Texas and Denton, then Austin College and Sherman. If you have a student at any of those places or a cousin or somebody you know, maybe you're a college counselor, you place somebody, whatever, and you want to make the arrangements, then I would love to meet them. That would be incredibly helpful for me, and I would enjoy that tremendously. Also, if you can attend one of our receptions, we'll have those sign-up sheets up shortly. And you're one of the areas that I'm at, I'm happy to meet you as well. I had a college counselor reach out to me this week and say, love to meet you when you're in San Antonio, and so I'm excited about that. I also wanted to say something about an announcement that I made last week. I said, if you're connected to a college, a senior level admission person, president, somebody active in it, knows the school very, very well. If you know somebody well and you can talk to them about coming on the podcast, I will very seriously consider it. But I want to be clear because I had somebody reach out and say, so-and-so from such and such school would be a great person for you to have on the podcast. That's not what I'm asking. So I already have a lot of people who I already know who are great to come on the podcast, and I've lined a lot of them up. But when I don't know somebody, it can be a hassle getting through the red tape of, gatekeepers and all that stuff. So if you can help me bypass the gatekeepers, that's what I'm asking. If you can secure a commitment ahead of time, talk to someone you know and say, hey, would you be willing to come on? And then you can make the connection. There's a very good chance I will do that if it's either a school we haven't featured or if it's one we haven't talked about in a while. So a lot of times listeners reach out, and I'll be honest, a lot of times it's like maybe where they went to school or where their kids at school, and they kind of want more publicity because they think it's a great place and they want to spread the word. And that's awesome. One way you can do that is secure that commitment from somebody. Now, you can't guarantee I'll do it because it could be a lot of things. We might have an interview already planned for that school. But there's a good chance I will do it if it's a school that I feel we need to get the word out on. And, we don't only have famous schools. Like, we intentionally want schools that fly under the radar. So we're kind of looking for a little bit of both. To be honest with you, if we don't give some name brands, our people will be frustrated because we do get a lot of requests for the name brand. I mean, they get lots of applications. That makes sense. There's a lot of interest there. But we also want to have a balance between those and the hidden gems. So that's another thing you could do if you want to help out other listeners on the podcast. Keep sending in your ideas. I was talking to a listener to the podcast, and she really, really liked this letter that came in from the listener from the West Coast that Lisa and I discussed. And she said to me, are you going to put that up on the website? Because I think other people really need to hear that discussion. Can you put that up as a standalone audio file? I never even thought of that. And I'm like, that's a great idea. So obviously part 2 will run on Thursday for that. But there's a lot of wisdom amongst our listeners. SpeakPipe's a great place to go. SpeakPipe's not only for questions for listeners, but it's great for you to leave your ideas. And if we think it will help others, then we're going to go for it. All right. So today I'm going to talk about changes that I'm expecting in admissions in 2025 and in 2026. And friends, the next thing that you'll hear after the conversation of how admissions is going to be impacted by all the changes going on financially is the final part of my interview with Kathleen deLaski, part 5 on 5, and we'll talk about her book, about who needs college, and then we'll put her on the hot seat. Now, some of this is conjecture on my part. Some of this will be me surmising, but there are things I feel very confident about these changes. And why am I so confident? Well, colleges are a business. And I know a lot of people don't like that. They're like, ooh, don't say that. Because as soon as you say business, their interpretation is your fundamental goal is to make money and make a profit. You know, Hillary and I were talking on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about the importance of yield. And Hillary said, I'm going to call it a business. And I was really glad she did. Because it's important to realize that colleges are business. They're nonprofit organizations. And a nonprofit organization is a legal entity organized for the collective of the public good or for social benefit, as opposed to strictly aiming at generating profit. Nonprofits, sure, they're mission-oriented. They have goals, and no members get to distribute resources that come in amongst the directors, officers, etc., like a for-profit business. So there's differences that are clear, but just like schools are businesses, your own family is a business. I know you've never thought of it that way. Let me give you an example of what I mean. Many standard home insurance policies don't cover things like floods, earthquakes, and wildfires. So let's say you had the misfortune of a $60,000 flood damage, and your insurance company wasn't going to cover it. Well, you can't have water throughout your house. You got to take care of that right away. Let's say, for sake of example, you have $10,000 in the emergency fund. What are you going to do? This is $60,000. You got to come up with $50,000. So let's say you end up taking out a 10% interest loan. Now you're going to need $55,000. Well, you really only have two options. You can tighten up your belt and reduce your expenses, but the chances are you're not going to be able to shave $55,000 off of your home expenses. Maybe you'll reduce your going out to eat and your DoorDash and your Uber Eat habit. Maybe you'll cancel that vacation, or instead of taking a $5,000 vacation, you're taking an $800 vacation. So sure, those are the kinds of things you'll do, but you're unlikely to be able to come up with the $55,000. So the only other option is inevitable. You got to increase your earnings. You got to bring in more revenue. Maybe it's a side hustle you got to do. Maybe you got to pick up more overtime hours. Maybe one spouse was not working, or they need to go back to work, or they were working part-time, they need to go to full-time work. Colleges are the same. When they have a tsunami, and that's what's happening right now financially, and we've talked about all the reasons why before, and there's a lot of things that were going on to cause this, right? That's already happening when you look at birth dearth, demographic cliff, lower birth rates, souring attitudes toward college, growth of alternative programs, competitor options outside of the college degree. All of these things we've talked about a lot in the past, decreased international applications. But by the way, China apps are way down across the country. They're down. Some places 30 to 40%. The number one source of international applicants is down. Anyway, let me not go off on that. So colleges are already going through that, right? And so they're going to do the budget cutting things, freezing salaries, freezing hirings, letting faculty and administrators go, hiring more adjunct professors and less full professors. But they got to increase the revenue, because that's not enough. So what I'm going to share today are ways I'm fully expecting colleges to either tighten their belts, but mostly increase their revenue. And I'm particularly going to focus on ways that impact admissions. I won't exclusively share admissions content, but that's primarily what I'm going to share today is admissions content. And some might be thinking, well, how do you know this stuff? It's just things I've seen over the 25 years that I've done this work. I've just seen it consistently. And now we've got an emergency. It's inevitable. Some might be thinking, well, have you talked with any admission officers, or are you just shooting from the cuff? I feel very confident about this. But I did talk to one school this week, and they confirmed every single thing I'm going to share here. And you're going to hear this because in live time throughout 2025, when I'm on with senior level people, I'm going to ask them about these things. It's not going to be the theme of all the interviews, but I'm just going to ask them because I think there's an absolute crisis right now in higher ed, a financial crisis. And that's why I've been doing a lot of different segments related to money and finances and stability and changes. But the difference today is I'm talking about admissions factors that I expect are going to change. All right, let's dive in and go through the list. By the way, I don't claim this is everything. I'm also not listing things in the order of their importance. I'm literally telling you them in no particular order other than the order they popped into my head when I was just doing my brainstorming. And this was not an episode where I did research. This is an episode where I just sat down and I just thought, like, what are other things colleges are going to do? So the first thing that popped in my mind is they're going to increase their class size. Now, not everybody can do this. Some people open the year, they're not at full enrollment. Obviously, if you're not at full enrollment, you can't increase your class size. That's a common conversation you'll hear amongst admission officers when they talk about amongst themselves. They'll say, did you make your class? Or when did you make your class? Meaning, what was the point in the calendar year when you knew you made your class? And a lot of schools already are not meeting their class, meaning at full enrollment. So if you're not at full enrollment, you're not meeting your class, or you aren't sure if you're going to meet your class until late into the summer, then you're not in a position to be talking about increasing your class size. But for schools that are farther up the pecking order of the totem pole of selectivity, they can do this, and they are going to do it. Now, not everybody can do it to the same extent. A lot of places are constrained because there's just no capacity, and especially for 2025. 2026, they have a little bit more time to plan and budget. But they're going to do it to the extent to which they can. So, for example, if you can bring $40,000 more in per kid, and you can add 250 kids, you just brought $10 million into your budget. And while you're still going to have to go through a lot of those other processes that we talked about, maybe even cutting programs, and I'll talk about some of the ones that are most likely to be on the chopping block here coming up here in a second. So it's a both and solution. But if you can bring in $10 million of revenue, that's $10 million less dollars you need to cut from your budget. So I am fully expecting to see class sizes to get larger at more selective schools that have no problem meeting their class, and they can also bring in a lot more kids without a quality drop-off. Fully expecting this to happen. Another thing I'm expecting, and this is part of how you're going to meet your class, is converting doubles to triples. We would do this sometimes when I was in admissions. We would see these really exciting applicants that would come through. We were already full, and we wouldn't want to pass on them, and there was conversation about converting doubles to triples, or we'd have 6 or 10 rooms that had been we could convert to triple if we had an exciting applicant. We did it both for exciting applicants, and I remember one year we did it just because there was concern maybe about a revenue shortage. Seen it done both ways, and coming up with other creative forms of housing. Besides just converting doubles to triples or doubles to quads or triples to quads, all kinds of creative things, renting hotels out. There's lots of different things you're going to see happen. Airbnb. I mean, just pay attention to the space. Pay attention to the space. It is completely inevitable. And by the way, the school that I talked to confirmed that this is happening. And watch for 2026 when they have more time and place to really do it. Okay, another thing. Look for more kids to get admitted in a regular decision. For schools to go out with more acceptances. Now, this is two things. This is both protection for lower yield. Remember, yield is the percentage of students that say yes to your offer, right? So if you go out with I'll keep it simple. If you go out with 5,000 offers, if you have a 50% yield, then 2,500 enroll. Okay. If you have a 20% yield, then 1,000 enroll. All right. 70% yield, 3,500 enroll. So it's a percentage of people say yes to your offer. So that number has been trending down as people apply to more and more schools. So you're going to see that for that reason alone. This is stuff that was happening before this increased, most recent financial wave. And when I say recent, I'm talking about cuts to NIH, the potential removal of government funding, like what happened to Columbia, $400 million, and there are 900 colleges that are on their radar. By the way, some of those colleges that are on their radar, like a UCLA, they are really, really on the radar because they're both one of the schools that gets some of the most NIH money, and they're also a school that the current administration has said, Columbia, we hit you, and we got our eye on these other 9 schools, and here they are that we might hit as well. So, I mean, you got to be taking all kinds of precautions if that kind, 10, 20, $50 million hits. I mean, they just do ridiculous amounts of damage to your budget. I don't care how wealthy you are. Remember, the wealthier schools, they function a lot like wealthier families. If you have a family that makes a lot of money, like let's say north of $500,000, they don't have the same lifestyle of a family that's living off of $80,000. So they may have more money, but they've adjusted their lifestyle. That's the same way colleges are. The colleges that have that money, they've adopted it. You see lower student-teacher ratios there. They may have a 1-4, 1-5, 1-6 ratio, not a 1-20 ratio. And not just teachers, but faculty, administrators, staff. And then the salaries are higher. Okay, facilities may be better. The programs are more robust, and the support services. So all this leads to much higher expenses. Just like a family that makes $500,000 spends more money a year than a family that makes 80. So even that these are wealthy schools, they're not prepared for this because they already spend a lot. So admitting more students in regular, it's both protection for lower yield, but it's also because they want a larger class to begin with. It's like the same thing I said before, expanding their class. They'll be happy to have their yield because they want more kids in, because the easiest and quickest way to increase your revenue is to bring in more families. That's the easiest way. What are your other options to bring in money? Well, if you have an endowment, you hope you get a good return on your endowment. But you can't just flip a switch and hope for that. In fact, right now, that's another challenge because stocks have been going down, which is going to reduce endowment income. That's another way schools are getting squeezed. So that's not a quick fix option for you. Well, summer rentals of your properties, you can do that. But in the big scheme of things, that's not tens of millions of dollars. And they will try to do more things like that to the extent that they can. That's a lot easier to plan for 2026 and 2025. All right, what else? Go to the wait list more. I am fully expecting, and I'd be very surprised if I'm wrong on this, to see more waitlist activity, more colleges going to the waitlist. Because remember, they want more students. So they want more students. And so that means you take more people off the waitlist because there's no way getting more students. Next thing, more focus on full pay and high pay. It's just inevitable. If you need money, you need to get money, and you get money from tuition paying parents. You might want more families that are full Pell students. You may, in your heart of hearts, feel like our school would be better with that. But that's not paying your bills. So I'll share something with you. The list of schools that claim that they are need blind, it's not really the accurate list. First of all, in reality, you've heard me say this before, in reality, there's really, truly no such thing as being truly need blind, right? Like even the schools that say they're need blind and meet full demonstrated need, that's about 30 schools that say they do both. But if we say, are you need blind for international students? That number goes way down. It's like 6. Are you need blind for all transfers? Most schools are not. Are you need blind for your wait list? Most schools are not. And so there really isn't anything truly as need blind. And then when you take into consideration even the schools that say they truly are need blind, and I agree there are degrees of this, they still have to intentionally travel to affluent areas in their recruitment. There's no way they can say where we don't have to target affluent communities. It's just a reality. So of all those schools that say they're need blind, there's a bunch of them that really truly aren't even need blind. Now, I said schools aren't need blind by that definition. Sort of if you're a little bit, either you're a little bit pregnant or you can't be a little bit pregnant. You're either pregnant or you're not. So don't say you're need blind for this group, but not for transfers international waitlist, right? You're not really need blind. But even if you are mostly need blind, and need blind, a simple definition is we're not looking at your wallet when we make admissions decisions. We're making decisions independently of looking at your wallet. There's still a group of schools on there that really truly aren't need blind already. But You know how they say you're judged by the company you keep? Well, people want to be able to be in that group. I remember when Haverford and Wesleyan both came forward and said, you know what, we're not knee blind anymore. We can't pretend that we are. We need to be completely honest with you. It was such a big kerfuffle. And I remember when Grinnell was saying they didn't know if they could be knee blind anymore. Oh my goodness, the alumni went crazy. And I'm happy that they have that value. It's also not the most welcoming thing to say to a group of families, oh, we're need aware. And you're sitting out there and people who know they need financial aid. And so they're like, okay, what am I, chopped liver? Should I get up and leave? So, it's much harder for me. That's how people will interpret it. And I know I'm not getting into the nuances of what it means to be need aware, need conscious, need sensitive, because a lot of times that's a misperception of what that actually means, but that's not the purpose of this podcast. We've talked about that in other podcasts before. The bottom line is colleges want to be in that group, and it's a much more welcoming message to families. So that puts an inherent type of pressure. So a lot of times when schools come forward and they say they're not really need blind anymore, the reality is they hadn't really truly been need blind for 10 years anyway. There's going to be more or less schools that are need blind, so the ability to pay is going to be prioritized. And families with money are going to have a significant advantage. Now, at the most selective schools, I'll be honest, there's so many people that can pay that don't think the school with a 10% admit rate is going to a 40% admit rate. It just doesn't work like that. But it will be noticed. It'll be noticeable. It's not going to be noticeable like that, but it will be noticeable, especially if you work in those institutions. Or if you work with a significant number of kids that apply to the schools, I'm confident you're going to see a difference. All right. What's another thing? More mid-tier colleges, and I'm just talking about selectivity, colleges with lower yield. They are going to be dangling up more merit scholarships. They just are. Because those schools find it very difficult to compete other than on price. And that's not a knock against those schools, because there are a lot of incredibly great schools that are overlapping with other schools that are just incredibly difficult to beat. When I did boarding school admissions, we were a fantastic school, but it was hard for us to yield against Andover, Exeter, Deerfield, Choate, Hotchkiss, St. Paul's, Lawrenceville. Like, these are the most selective boarding schools in the country. I don't know if I said Deerfield. It was hard to yield against them. If we beat those schools once or twice a year, we were doing well. Didn't mean we weren't a great school. It's just the reality. It's hard to yield. So it's those schools that are the most selective take more kids than they're taking kids that you would have yielded. So you're getting squeezed that way. And the college I talked to this week, they told me this is what's happening. We're getting squeezed above because schools are taking more kids that we would have yielded, that we don't usually win directly against in an overlap battle in our cross apps. We don't usually win. And we're also getting squeezed from schools that are less selective than we are, but they're throwing money at our kids that is really, really appealing to the families. So look for more aggressive use of merit aid. Another thing is families are going to have more leverage than ever when they do an appeal. When you do an appeal, you're going to have more leverage than ever. Now, normally when I walk people through the appeal process, I go over 4 different types of appeals. I talk about the need-based appeal. And the need-based appeal has to be to a school that promises to meet full demonstrated or calculated need, and you need to demonstrate that you have a need greater than what the financials show. It could be anything. It could be healthcare expenses, dental expenses, reduction in income, decreased work. So you have something to do with your resources looking less plentiful than when you applied. Sometimes it's because you're using the base year, which is prior year when you do those forms. So for a student that's starting in the fall 2025, the base year that's used for calculations is 2023, right? But you're not living off 2023 income anymore. So sometimes you can show there's been a decrease in 2024, 2025. Some schools will put that through professional judgment, and that's one type of appeal, need-based appeal. Then there's a merit-based appeal. That's usually more for schools that explicitly lay out that they give certain kinds of money for certain test scores and GPA, and you maybe didn't have that at the time you applied, but some schools will allow your test scores that came in up through March or April or May to count. So you got a higher test score. In fact, I literally just heard from a family literally today. They got a higher IB score and therefore qualified for a certain amount of merit money because the school that their kid is going to has some calculations built in that correlates merit packages to certain performances. That was on an IB exam in that case. So that's more the merit-based appeal. You never hit the standard before. They'll accept credentials passed when you apply. Now you have it. Those are kind of straightforward ones. And there's the competitor appeal. That's tricky, but that can be effective in certain cases. That, I'm not trying to make this whole thing on appealing 8 awards. We've done lots of episodes on that in the past, but that's basically where you're able to show that another school evaluated your financial need differently and had a stronger offer. First of all, a school has to respond to competitor appeals, and then it has to truly be a competitor. It can't be a school that's less selective. And normally it has to be a reasonable amount of money, although sometimes I've seen last year I had someone get $30,000 on a competitor appeal for 1 year. So, that's depends on the situation. So those are like typically the biggest appeals, right? Is it a need-based appeal? Is it a merit-based appeal? Or is it a competitor appeal? But more and more and more, and I've seen this now for the last probably 5 years, I'm seeing more and more people just flat out doing appeals saying, I can't make ends meet with this award. This is a school I want to go to. If you could get us another 5,000, we'll enroll and we can make this happen. I've already seen more and more people, more and more times that type of appeal winning out, especially if they know they'll yield a kid. I'm fully expecting people to be more and more successful with that because the colleges need money and they need students. So you have more leverage. Another thing, now this is more on a counselor side, but I'm just going to be really transparent. It's harder for me right now in building college lists from a standpoint of putting schools in categories. It's been hard for a while for these highly rejective schools that admit less than 15%. You can just know if you have a strong enough student and they have a cluster of those schools, they're likely to get into some, but you kind of really don't know which ones most of the time. But when I'm working on a college list, and this literally happened this week with the family I met with, Michigan would have normally been an unlikely or a long shot. So to me, an unlikely or long shot means you have less than a 1 in 7 chance. But because of the changes that I see happening to Michigan's budget, they get the second most NIH money. Or, they're up there. Some years they're second, some years they're, top. They're always top 5 in terms of the amount of money they get. And so with this new policy on only 15% of it come from administrative, is going to hit some of these schools crazy amounts of hundreds of millions of dollars. And then, God forbid, they get whacked with reduced funding because they're not handling protests well, then that's going to be even more. But anyway, back to this story. So I told this family, I said, normally Michigan to me would be an unlikely for you, but I actually think it's in the reach category. Reach, stretch, challenge school. For my system, that's anywhere from 1 in 7 to 1 in 3 in regular are your chances. So I said, that's just the impact that I foresee happening. Because college is going to have to reach out and enroll more kids. So it's really hard. It's harder for me as a counselor to properly bucket schools because everything feels like it's in flux. Now, I thought you might be curious of what schools are getting the most NIH funding. So I'm just going to share very quickly the 20 schools that get the most money just from NIH. So Hopkins, 842 million, almost 843. Okay. They are the leader and they've been so for a while. University of California, San Francisco, they do so much medical research because that school is, that's not an undergraduate school, but a medical powerhouse, medical research powerhouse. They're almost 800 million. UPenn, over 700 million. Duke, over 700 million. By the way, you can go into the school newspapers and you'll read all these articles about the apoplectic fallout from these NIH funding that's happening to all of these schools. University of Michigan, 698. University of Pittsburgh, boy, this is tough. They don't have the endowment some of the other schools do. 658 million. WashU in St. Louis, 633. Columbia, 633. Stanford, 628. Yale, 622. Rounding out the top 10, UCLA, 580. UC San Diego, 572. UNC Chapel Hill, 559. UW, University of Washington, Seattle, 558. Vanderbilt, 546. Okay, and then the last ones, Emory, Wisconsin, NYU, and Northwestern. All these schools are going to have, these are like some of your most selective schools in the country. These are the 1%ers, either in the public realm or the private realm or overall. And they're out. I mean, there's an article with Hopkins is out $800 million in total because this NIH funding is only one source. All right. Whew. Man, let's get off that. Another number 10, reduction in grad school programs. There's so many articles on that. Just start Googling reduction in grad school admissions, grad school programs. I shared with you a couple of weeks ago. University of Pennsylvania literally rescinded acceptances they already sent out because they realized there's no way. We got a couple $100 million shortage. We got to come up with a way. We got to reduce these grad school programs after they sent out acceptances. Number 11, more early decision incentives. We've been seeing this for a while. Schools with sharp elbows, High Point started offering free masters for ED applicants to certain programs. You can get a master's as well as a bachelor's. If you ED, look for that to be on the rise. More schools using direct admissions. Like I said, that's already happening. The growth of it through Common App, Niche, and others that are promoting it heavily. So why would direct admission be more appealing? Well, I'm going to share a couple stories, and I think this will be helpful. One of them was from boarding school admissions. One is college related. So when I was doing prep admissions, one of the things that we did not like is several of the Catholic schools in the area, they did something that we really didn't like. What they did was their acceptances went out way before everybody else. By the way, this is a national thing. It wasn't just in our area. Not every Catholic school, but it's pretty common. Not only did the acceptances go out, but the date that you had to reply would go out before the acceptances. And if you had a scholarship, you would lose your scholarship if you didn't accept the scholarship before other schools like us even put our acceptances out. Why do schools do that? Because they know once you get in, sometimes you can lose enthusiasm for other schools and you can increase your chances of yield. So in the boarding school world, March 10th was the date acceptances went out. And it was considered a major violation to send an acceptance out a date other than that. You were not playing fair. And that's not just a boarding school thing. There's something known as Ivy Day. It's Ivy League agrees to send out notices on the same time for all of them. Why? Because they know it's an unfair advantage for one school to notify 3 or 4 weeks earlier than others, even that schools like Dartmouth do wink letters. So let's not get into wink letters. That's another story. It's the same concept. Direct admission can be very appealing because if I know that I'm in with a good financial offer, I can stop this search right now. Now, not everybody's going to think that way, but if 2% of people think that way, you just yielded 2% more than you would have before. So I'm looking for that to be one more reason for schools to use direct admission. Another thing, look for more extension of deadlines. Colleges need kids. Look for more extensions of deadlines. You look for the notices to come out. Oh, we have decided to extend our application deadline. You just look for it. This is not anything new. We've seen all these things before. I'm just saying they're going to happen with increased rapidity. Now, there's one I expect from a non-admission standpoint. Look for more hidden fees. School never had a technology fee. How many people actually, when they're picking a school, really go in and look at the fine line on student fees? How many people actually do that? And even if they did, rarely will they make a decision on it. All of a sudden, you can sneak a $200 technology fee into the bill. Most people wouldn't even notice it. You used to charge $75 for parking. Why not make parking $200? You got to raise revenue. And the last thing I want to share with you is more creative uses of admissions. And the one I want to draw on as an example of this is an article that came out 3 days ago in the Bennington Banner. That's Bennington College's newspaper. Now, Bennington College is a liberal arts college in Southwest Vermont. I'm going to read this to you because it's short. Bennington College launches new late decision application round. Bennington College announces the launch of a brand new college admissions application round for prospective students. Late decision. The new admission round responds to the evolving needs of prospective students navigating their college search in a remarkable time. Each April, selective college admissions directors take calls from their college counseling colleagues on the other side of the desk. They share stories of applicants who are either not satisfied with their options or wish to rethink them for various reasons and inquire about accepting a late application, says David Buchwald, Bennington College's VP for Enrollment Management and Marketing. Bennington wants to democratize the opportunity and turn it into an application round for all prospective students who haven't previously applied this year. With the changing political environment and climate, we believe there are even more students than usual who want to consider our creative, close, and inclusive community in beautiful Vermont, said Bennington College President Laura Walker. The late decision application round, designed for students who are discovering Bennington later in their senior year or gap year, opens on Monday, March 10th. Students can apply either via the Common App or Bennington's dimensional application with a deadline of April 8th. Admissions decisions will be sent out on April 17th, and acceptance students will have until May 1 to reply. Like early action and regular decision, it is a non-binding admissions round. The college will host an on-campus event called Bennington Next on April 28th for admitted students to visit and speak with Bennington College's remarkable faculty and student community. As a test-optional institution with a dimensional application, Bennington has long been a leader in holistic admissions. Late decision is an extension of that student-driven approach. Not all compelling and talented students approach their college search in the same linear fashion, especially as they navigate evolving interests, developing identities, and financial realities, says Buchwald. The introduction of late decision reflects our ongoing commitment to make the college admission process more accessible, said President Walker. Reflecting this commitment, the college is targeting 15 seats for students admitted in late decision, including proportional need and merit-based financial aid. Just like our earlier admission rounds, Bennington aims to meet the full financial need at the time of admission. Waitlist activity, which typically takes place around the same time, will be managed separately from late decision. The college anticipates a similar acceptance rate for this new round as for other rounds. For early action and both rounds of early decision this cycle, the acceptance rate was 37%. Now, personally, I think this is a brilliant idea. If I was involved and I was at that college, I'd be voting 100% for this. First of all, every single thing they said on there is true. A lot of people do discover late what they're interested in. There's a market out there for that. But they're also acknowledging the financial realities of this can help us too. Now, if a college accepting 37% sees value, what about the colleges admitting 60%, 70%, 80%, 90% with lower yield? I predict this catches on. I predict more follow. That's what happens when you have a good idea. Remember when Colby introduced self-reporting test scores in 2016? That was the time I was writing my book. And I remember I was doing a section on this for Colby, how Colby had done this and it was spreading. And I had to keep changing the number because the first time I did my book is like 60 colleges have already followed Colby. And then later, as we went through rounds of revisions, it was like over 100. It kept changing because that's what happens when somebody comes up with a good idea, right? People follow. So am I predicting that late decision becomes as popular as early decision? Of course not. But do I think other people are going to copy it? Absolutely. Do I think it's smart? Absolutely. Do I think it's partly motivated by the financial realities we're in? Absolutely. Well, hopefully, friends, you found this helpful. I don't claim to have listed every single thing that I think is going to happen to change admissions, but these are all changes that I fully expect will happen 2025, 2026. But beyond that, I don't know. That's too far in the future for me to make any predictions. And just thank you for listening. Friends, let's transition to my final part with Kathleen deLaski talking about her book, Who Needs College, and letting her go on the hot seat in our lightning round.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, in my final segment with Kathleen deLaski, Kathleen explains what she means when she says we need to fix and disrupt college education. Kathleen gives an example of who she feels has done a good job fixing and disrupting. Kathleen shares how the Educational Design Lab she started is now working with 100 community college on innovative projects. Kathleen talks to us about the Who Needs College Anymore discussion groups. And Kathleen goes on the hot seat in our lightning round. Listen and enjoy.
How do you hack your way to a good job? And so there's going to be more, I think, of people kind of doing pieces of it on their own, using the internet, and that more people will be doing that, and fewer people will be doing the 4-year degree. But the 4-year degree, hopefully in a stepladder form, will certainly live on. Will live on through the century at least, and probably longer. Because it is a nice model to residential, go off to college, and it's a lovely model. It's just kind of out of reach and not the right fit for everyone.
Yeah, and I think I'm sure you have your detractors who think you're discouraging college, but I found anything but that to be true. One thing you say in the book, which I think captures a lot of what you've been saying in our conversation. I really like it. You use the axiom, fix it and disrupt it. So what do you want to say about that? Because I think I know exactly what you're trying to say, but you might want to elaborate on that. When you say fix it and disrupt it, talk to our listeners about that.
Well, I mean, there's a reason why I started, my approach to this work was to start a nonprofit to help colleges disrupt themselves. And so, you could call what colleges are doing both fixing and disrupting. So colleges are somewhat limited in how they can approach what we've been talking about on the podcast, because they are hamstrung by the funding model that they have and by accreditation. I mean, it takes, apparently, I was just talking to a professor who told me, it takes 6 weeks to set up a new certificate program. It takes 2 years to set up a new course. And
Wow.
he's in the AI field. And, within 2 years, by the time he gets it approved, it's out of date. It's out of date, right?
Yeah.
And so the incremental kind of fix strategies that colleges have to often, utilize to bring about change, I understand. I mean, I've been on the inside. I have empathy for the fact that it's hard to disrupt. Disrupt would suggest that you're bringing in a new model. And colleges have tried to bring in partner with boot camps. They've, some of them have tried that, and it hasn't gone that well because, startups are, finicky organizations to partner with, and it doesn't always work. And it's been, nerve-wracking. But the disruption part, you've seen some universities disrupt themselves. The best example is probably Southern New Hampshire, where they went from being
Sure.
a kind of
Online.
a sleepy, residential to being, now the largest university in the country, mostly online.
Yeah.
And they're doing all kinds of things that we don't have time to talk about. But
Arizona State is doing a lot of
Arizona
things too.
State is a disruption example. You can do it, but not in all environments, and not, and not every, and it's not for the faint-hearted. And so I support both strategies to both, help the traditional construct of college kind of meet the moment, and to help outside players bring models, bring new models in, whether it's apprenticeships or boot camps or certification programs. There's a lot of interesting experimentation going on. I feature companies that are doing work simulation, and colleges are starting to partner with them. How do you simulate work if you can't actually get all your students an internship? These are really interesting developments that are changing higher ed, and I think for the good.
Are you encountering receptivity at all from I could see a cutting edge thinker, presidents at schools wanting to consult with you and and hear your thoughts on where things are going. Are you finding that? Are you finding more resistance, or you're somebody that we need to listen to?
I think mostly people are receptive, and to be totally fair. I mean, a lot of the ideas that I'm talking about are not new, are not brand new, right? Like
Right.
they don't need me to tell them that.
Sure.
It's really a matter, I get more questions about the how than the what,
Sure.
because, they've heard some of this before.
And your lab explores and experiments with things like that. And it's some of your work, right? The design lab?
Absolutely. That's what I was going to say, which is that I think one of the hows is that, 100 community colleges are working with the lab now to create these micro pathways, which are these short-term pathways that involve certificates. Sometimes they involve certifications. A percentage of them involve work-based experience, but they're really designed to meet employer demand of the moment. And, that's a mindset shift for colleges. And they're responding to it really well.
Well, I think you've mentioned this before, in reference to places like cybersecurity, other places where the demand so exceeds the supply. I think they're being forced to, what's that saying? Something is the necessity of invention.
Oh yeah, the mother of invention. Crisis or something.
Yes, yeah. The idea that, when you're in a dilemma, you have to, what you're doing is not working. You need to try new things.
Yes. And I will say that dropping enrollment over the last decade has gotten the attention of community colleges in particular, but all colleges.
So we're going to transition to the lightning round and wind up here. Is there anything we haven't said on the topic that you want to share?
I feel like we've covered it.
Mm-hmm. Good. So let's go off this topic and get lighthearted. What advice would Kathleen give to her 18-year-old self?
Slow down.
Does that mean don't work as much?
Yeah. Well, just enjoy the moment and don't be in a hurry to, be an adult, which I kind of was.
Yeah, well, you're not the only one. If you couldn't do what you're doing now in something related to education innovation, what else would be appealing to you?
Oh, wow. Well, I've actually started painting, and I think I would love to be a famous painter.
Wow. Are you any good?
No, not really.
But you enjoy it.
Yeah, my mother became a painter in middle age and got quite good. Her stuff's up around my house.
Wow, you're following in her footsteps.
Yeah, I'm trying to, but it's.
So, are you more of like paint the rainbow and the trees, or portraits? What's your?
Well, I would say Matisse is my muse, my inspiration. I love still life, but I like to change it up and like paint things the wrong colors, and so that's kind of my way to get color outside the lines.
Cool. What's something that grinds your gears? What's one of your pet peeves?
Oh wow, linear thinking.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Because I'm a definitely. I think around things, and then I have certain people in my life who are just like get very frustrated by my jumping around.
And have you always been this way? So this was in the teens and 20s. This was you.
Oh yeah, this is why I love design thinking, because it's really about pattern finding from all over the place, and it's about taking the messy and organizing it. I love that.
That's good. What's something on the bucket list?
Oh wow, well, going to Yosemite, which I'm going with my kids this spring. Cool.
What are you gonna do there?
Just hike. Hike. I'm gonna actually try to do a little painting. I found a painting class at Yosemite.
Look at that. You're serious. Good. Enjoy life. Enjoy nature. So we'd like to wind down by asking our thought leaders, what's your best advice for our three constituencies: parents, college counselors, and students? What would you say?
So should I take each of those in turn?
Yeah, you can. We've had people say I have the same advice for all of them, and most people have individual advice, but you can answer whatever you want.
Well, the parent one for me is most dear to my heart, because this is one of the reasons I wrote the book, was to kind of process my own thinking about all the things I did wrong as a parent, trying to guide my kids through this pressure cooker process of do they go to college? How seriously should we take it? So I would say that for parents, my advice is chill. I mean, not chill all the way, because the rigor is needed, but I think I was too vocal about, college or bust. And so enough said, but I think to understand that there's many paths to success, and you don't have to make your kid feel under the stress that's in your head, right?
Was it difficult socially to be in circles wherever you talked about it before? You know what I mean? Going to Vassar and all these places.
Yeah.
And it's just not socially acceptable in upper middle class America to your kid not to go to college. Like, what was that like as a parent to what's your kid going? Oh, they're not going.
Yeah, well, what's funny is I started to get a lot of calls, like, surreptitious or, sort of back channel calls from other parents who maybe were also worried about their kids, but they didn't want to talk about it at the, at the back to school night, right?
Sure. You brought everybody out who identified with you.
Exactly. It was kind of nice, actually.
Yeah.
And then for students, I mean, if they're 18, as opposed to, 5, where, I think things will change a lot in the next 10 years. But if you're on the cusp of college right now, I would say, if the fear of debt is not, weighing you down for, either because your parents are helping you out or because you're thinking about community college and it won't be too expensive, I would say give college a try. If you can always leave, as 40 to 50% of people do. So, it's not it's not a sentence, doesn't have to be a 4-year sentence. You can try it out because there'll be a lot of learning about what you do want to do and what you don't want to do.
And about yourself too.
Yeah. And then for counselors, I mean, I think this issue of this idea that we have to frame all pathways as pathways of dignity is very important. I mean, the hard part for you all is that, the future is not evenly distributed. In certain places, like Colorado, for example, there's great apprenticeship programs. In South Carolina, near where you are, there's really good apprenticeships, but these things are not available everywhere. So it is, I have a friend who has started and he's actually working with charter schools, and I talk about him in the book, started a organization called Willow Ed, which is trying to curate and map all the multiple pathway options in a school district or in a region. So look, if any of your readers are interested, listeners are interested in that, it's called Willow Education. And, they're starting to work around the country to, build out and elevate the pathways that are good and available that are not, a 4-year degree.
Kathleen, this has been awesome. You've been most generous with your time. Talk to us how people can get the book or how they can follow you if you're active on social or any other way. How can, if they say, I want more of Kathleen?
Wonderful. Yes. That would be great, because this is you are my target audience for sure. So the best way, I have a one-stop shopping book website that is called, same as the book, whoneedscollegeanymore.org. And that has my LinkedIn. It has, I think, it has my Substack. I'm writing a lot on these topics, and you can order the book. One other thing. There's also discussion guides, which we've just put up, which I think could be useful here. Talk
to us about the discussion guides. Like, how are they being used?
Well, they're for either like a book group or a high school or a college or a set of stakeholders. I've got one for parents and families. So it's 10 questions to guide you through a conversation if you want to be a discussion starter, in your community or in your family or in your school.
Great, awesome. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed this immensely, and I really support the work you're doing. And so keep.
Well, thank you. I'd love to stay in touch. And if you want to do something in Atlanta, the person who actually really helped me get the lab started is now the president of Georgia Tech. So Angel Cabrera. So I might be coming down to do something with him, and
that's
would
great.
love to see you.
Yeah, the other thing that we could do is, sometimes after we've had a podcast like this, we have a webinar with all of our all of the families have heard you, and they're coming in and they have questions.
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah,
You mean, you
yeah.
would be a great person to be in conversation with in a webinar. I would love that.
Yeah, so let's look at doing that. We'll take it offline and find some dates that work.
Okay.
But our families love it. They come in and they've heard you and they have their questions, and I think we'd have a good time in there.
That would be terrific.
Great.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Kathleen.
Okay, bye.
On Thursday's episode, Vince is back, and we're talking about a hot topic in the news. Now, we actually record it tomorrow, and we're recording a couple different topics, so I'll pick one and play the one on Thursday that I feel will be of greatest interest to you on Thursday. And then Susan's back for a question from a listener who wants to know, is a student-led information session a sign the college is having financial problems? We have a brand new interview, and it's with Dawn Williamson, and she works for Comcast Advertising as their Chief Revenue Officer for Media Solutions. And she's hired hundreds of people in her career, and she's going to talk to us about how employers make hiring decisions. What is it that they're looking for? And then finally, we'll have the final part from a mom who is so happy she didn't end up caught up in what she calls the college trap. Lisa and I started that last week, and you'll hear the final part this week. And friends, you know by now, if you're a regular listener, that when I wrote my book, 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions, I picked 10 quotes that were my favorite quotes, and I included them at the start of the book. And oftentimes, I close by reading one of these quotes to you. For example, college is a match to be made, not a prize to be won. Frank Sachs, that's one I oftentimes read. That's one of the 10 in my book. I want to close by reading another quote. And it's just been on my mind a lot recently as I see the level of pressure and stress that high school students are under, especially in either private schools or more affluent suburbs, coast to coast, by the way. And so this is a quote from Frank Bruni. And you know, he's the author of the book, Where You'll Go Is Not Who You'll Be, a Pulitzer Prize writer. And here's what he said. For too many parents and their children, getting into a highly selective school isn't just another challenge, just another goal. A yes or a no from Amherst or Dartmouth or Duke or Northwestern is seen as the conclusive measure of a young person's worth, a binding verdict on the life that he or she has led up until that point. An incontestable harbinger of the successes or disappointments to come. Winner or loser, this is when the judgment is made. This is the great, brutal culling. What madness and what nonsense. Let me repeat the last part. What madness and what nonsense. See you on Thursday, friends.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Linda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joyce Ducker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stalianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Linda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcasts. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.